Hi guys, it's Bridget. Welcome back to my channel. In this video, I'm going to be recommending 5 quirky books that I think are fun and interesting and honestly just plain weird. If there's one thing that I love, it is picking up a book, thinking it's going to be totally normal, and then halfway through the story, you're wondering what the heck you're even reading because it's going places you never could have imagined. Things are getting very strange. But the writing is so good, the story is still compelling, and you can't put it down. So all of the books on this list are ones that gave me that experience, and I'm hoping that they will do the same for you. To kick off this list, I'm going to start with Sourdough by Robin Sloan. This story follows our protagonist Lois, who codes robotic arms in San Francisco. She is feeling overworked, lonely, and just generally disconnected from her life, the way I'm sure a lot of young professionals feel. One day she comes across this random takeout flyer and she orders some spicy soup and sourdough bread from these 2 brothers, and she becomes obsessed with their food. It becomes her favorite meal, and she forms a friendship with the owners of the restaurant. The 2 brothers end up closing their business, much to Lois's dismay. But before they leave, they give her their sourdough starter. From there, Lois begins making her own sourdough bread, and she finds a real passion for the hobby. And as the reader, you think you know where this story is going, that you're going to follow this woman as she explores this new hobby and finds meaning in her life. But let me tell you, the story is going to go places that you could never have imagined, and you will soon discover that there is more to this sourdough starter than meets the eye. And honestly, that's one of the reasons why I love this book so much, because you pick it up and you think it's going to be totally normal, and then out of nowhere, the story just starts going to these places that really make no sense, but also somehow totally work. It just manages to blend the perfect amount of magical realism into the story, and it just becomes like the perfect feel-good book. It is so wholesome, and I challenge anyone to read this book and not crave a warm slice of sourdough bread. Like seriously, I got through this book and felt like, you know what, I could be a baker. I should be a baker, even though I have never baked bread in my entire life. In the end, I just feel like this book has everything you could want in it. You've got unique characters, weird scientific experiments, robots, mysterious bread, and a hearty dose of individuality. It's just a wonderful book that will make you feel warm inside, if not a little bit confused by the end of it. The next book on this list is Lanny by Max Porter. This is such an odd little book. I honestly don't even really know how to adequately explain it to you or really express what makes it so special, but it is well worth the read, especially if you like books that play around with the format of its storytelling. The plot of the book focuses on a small town outside of London that a young boy and his family recently moved to. By all accounts, this is a normal town with normal problems, but all is observed by the mysterious and the ancient dead Papa Toothwort, who is awake and listening to everything. One day, the young boy disappears and his family and the town are left reeling and searching for answers. And you begin to learn about the town and its inhabitants through snippets of conversation without really much context, through streams of thoughts and words that flow towards dead Papa Toothwort, and in the small interactions between neighbors and friends. Every single page in this book feels deliberate and feels like so much thought went into the format of how the story was going to be presented to the reader. And you end up with a book that is wholly original, but also intimately familiar to anyone who has struggled with small town gossip, grief, loneliness, family dynamics, love, and just all of these intricacies of life. It's just a beautifully written book. It is so poetic, and I really don't think that I've read anything quite like it before. And it just manages to be sad and heartwarming and creepy and nostalgic all at the same time. So if you're looking for a short book that is a little bit out there, I highly recommend this one, especially if you're somebody who likes reading books that push the boundary of how to format a story. The next book on this list is My Sister the Serial Killer by Oyinkan Braithwaite. This is a fiction, sort of light thriller novel about 2 adult sisters who live in Nigeria. There's Korede, the older sister, and Ayoola, the younger. Korede is a productive member of society. She is a nurse, she's a good friend, a good family member, and just generally has her life together. Ayoola, on the other hand, is the complete opposite. She is impulsive, manipulative, spoiled, and she also happens to be a serial killer. She has a nasty habit of killing her boyfriends and leaving Quirky to pick up the pieces behind her. Now at first, these murders seem like a pretty manageable problem for Quirky. You know, it's just one of the quirks of her little sister that she has to deal with. You know, family is family. However, it soon becomes a crisis when Ayoola decides to start dating one of the doctors that Quirky works with. And Quirky starts worrying that this doctor, who, you know, she honestly has a bit of a crush on herself, is going to be her sister's next victim. What I love about this book is that it gets straight to the point. Even the title tells you what to expect in this book. It's about a sister who's a serial killer. And the chapters in this book are super short, which is always a plus for me. Some of them are like a couple of sentences, some of them are a page or two, but they're all super quick and fast paced, and so you can just fly through this book. But honestly, it is the dark humor and the insane relationship between the two sisters that really sold this book for me. They just constantly get into these situations where you're like, this is terrible, but also kind of hilarious. And don't get me wrong, this is certainly not a comedy, but I think it's the lighthearted tone of the book that really makes this a gem. If you're looking for something that's totally original and a little off kilter, and you typically like reading thrillers, I definitely recommend this book. The next book that I want to talk about is Fever Dream by Samanta Schweblin. This is a novella about a woman who is lying sick in a hospital bed, and she is trying to remember how she ended up there. She takes the reader through all of these moments up to the present in this sort of foggy, dreamlike state, and through it all, there is this young boy at her bedside trying to lead her through these memories and help her pick out the important moments that led up to what happened to her. As the title suggests, our narrator is extremely ill and she is stuck in this fever dream state. So a lot of her recollections don't really make a lot of sense and can be extremely confusing to her and the reader. The story jumps around as she tries to piece everything together the way that you would kind of try to make sense of a nightmare. The whole book manages to create this incredibly tense atmosphere in such a short span of time that as the reader, you are just trying to figure out what the heck is going on and you are waiting for the other shoe to drop. I consider this a quirky book because while it is tense and creepy, it is also just extremely weird. Like, it's just the most accurate description for it. I guarantee you will be confused most of the time that you're reading this, just wondering what is real, what is not, what is happening. Like, I don't really quite understand where this is going, but it's also so compelling that you can't stop reading. This is the kind of literary fiction that I love the most because I can't even imagine how the author had this bizarre story in her mind and managed to transfer it so successfully onto the page. It's also the type of book that I highly recommend you read in one sitting so that you can get the full impact of the dreamlike atmosphere that she creates. The fifth and last book on this list is one of my favorites, and it's also probably the quirkiest one here, and that is Mrs. Caliban by Rachel Ingalls. I loved this book when I read it, and I just don't think that enough people have read it. No one's talking about it, and I just thought it was so fun. The book follows a housewife who is in an unhappy marriage. She's recently lost her child, she's extremely depressed, and her husband just doesn't really like her anymore and doesn't spend any time with her. She knows that he's probably having an affair, and she's just miserable. One day she starts hearing these weird messages on the radio and on TV that seem to be directed to her specifically, which she thinks is weird, but she doesn't really dwell on it. And then shortly after this, she hears another alert on the radio, but this time it is about an escaped, dangerous, amphibious swamp monster that has broken free of its high security lab. The authorities are saying this creature is loose, it's already killed 2 people, when suddenly it shows up at her house looking for help. Much to her surprise, this creature is actually an intelligent being who can think and speak and is in generally the shape of a man, albeit a rather amphibious one, and she ends up starting an affair with him. They end up growing extremely close and they teach each other about life and love and what it means to be human. And it's just a generally very heartwarming story. I know it sounds so bizarre, but you will be rooting for these 2 characters by the end of the book. And like, honestly, who wouldn't root for a lonely housewife and her frogman lover? I will admit that I was a little bit embarrassed to tell people what I was reading when I was reading this book because it's just so strange when you say it out loud, but It's one of those books that has stuck with me to this day. It's just quirky and weird and sweet and fun, and I just loved it so much, and I cannot recommend it enough. So those are the 5 quirky books that I love and I think that you guys would love too. There's something so fun about picking up a book that surprises you, and I think all of these books do that. And one of the things that I love most about reading is embracing the weird and going outside of my comfort zone. Let me know if you guys have read any of these books before, or if you have your own quirky fun books that you love. I'm always looking for more recommendations. And if you enjoyed this video, please do remember to like and subscribe. Also, you can find me over on Instagram and Goodreads. I will put links to both of those sites down in the description below. Otherwise, guys, I will see all of you in my next video.